I recently got into a fist fight with my brother, causing me to miss my bus, only to find out the bus had been in a horrible accident with 2 fatalities. How has a few seconds changed your life? This one isn't life or death or anything, but I was in a shitty relationship in college and one of my friends called me from home to ask me if I wanted to go on a road trip with him. Originally I told him no, but as he was leaving my girlfriend called me and we broke up. It was a shitty relationship, but I was still hurt and wanted to have some fun, so I agreed to go with him last second to forget everything and just have fun. Barely made it before he left. On that trip I met a girl. 2.5 years later I am now marrying this girl in a month and never have been happier. TLDR went on a trip because I received a last second phone call and met my future wife because of it. Some people asked for more details. It's stories like these that make me wonder what I've missed out on, or gained, in life by making simple decisions. I have 2. One about me and one about my father. Mine's less climactic, so high school English tells me I should do that one first. Just got my license. Was sitting at a stoplight that was completely blind, buildings on either side. No right on red because no one could see. Was skipping a song and didn't notice the light had turned green. When I looked up and saw, I started to pull forward as an SUV comes barreling down at like 60 perpendicular to me and scraps my front end. If I had not been a music itch and just dealt with the song, I would have either been boned or in the side of the building. My dad used to work at One Liberty, which was right next to WTC. There was this awesome way the buildings connected like 30 stories up that my father always took to get to his building by going through WTC instead of just taking the front door. Anyway, one morning I adamantly demanded my father make me chocolate chip pancakes and refused to let him leave until he did. He was late to work. Guess the date. A boat I was on sunk off NJ into the near freezing Atlantic. When the Coast Guard arrived by helicopter, my friend was dead and I was unconscious. At the hospital it was determined my core body temp was 86F. If you Google that, it says fatal. A few more minutes in those better seas and I wouldn't be typing this now. When I was 4 years old there were 2 men wanted for murder on the loose in the area. On the news they had been described as survival experts. One day mom said she got a strange feeling like something bad was about to happen. So she took me and my sister to the park. When we got back our house had been broken into and all that was gone was a little cash and all of our camping gear. Seth MacFarlane can beat almost anyone at this. TLDR, he missed American Airlines Flight 11 out of Logan, Boston, by 10 minutes on the morning of the 11th of September, 2001. So, it was a bright and sunny day in Colorado. A few siblings and I decided to ride our bikes around. We had brought flashlights and entered into a large concrete trench sewer thing. It was about 10-15 feet tall, but got smaller as we went further in. So me and my sister are all we're scared. After about 15 minutes, we decided to turn around and go back after a little more pleading. As we return, the water level starts to rise from rain. We quicken our pace. So, right as we see the light of the entrance, our flashlight dies. We rush out and climb out of the trench. 30 seconds later, a huge ducking wave of water comes torrenting down the trenches. We left our bikes along the side of the trench, and some lady let us stay in her house. Our parents later drove by, saw the flooded trenches, and assumed we were dead until they got a call from us apparently about 5 minutes later. This girl I met at summer camp a while back told me this story about her brother. So her brother is studying really hard one night for a big test for his afternoon class the next day. He ends up not going to sleep until around 4 AM. But his alarm wakes him up the next day for his morning class in Norris Hall. He thinks, so I'm too tired to go to class. I can just skip this one. The date was the 16th of April, 2007. Virginia Tech. My dad had a customer in New York that he worked for. You could never make this man mad. Ever. He would just shrug and say, well, we'll just have to work through this. And smile and get to work. One day Dad finally asked him, "John, you are the most easygoing person I've ever seen. Why is that?" And he answered, "Dave, I was angry one day. I woke up late and rushed to get ready, and right as I got to the subway, the train pulled away right as I got to the station. There I sat cursing, having to wait for the next train. Already late to work and having a bad day, I walked into the ground floor of my office building, and that's when the elevator exploded as a terrorist flew a plane into it. My office was on the floor it hit. Since then, I'm on borrowed time." Felt really weird before I was about to take a car ride from home to school. Took a breather and drank a glass of water and felt better. Missed being in a 5-car accident caused by a coked up maniac by a few seconds. As a kid, my sister and I would fight a lot. We are both girls and close in age, so we would often end up in lame girl fights. When I was in grade 3, my sister and me were waiting for my mom to pick us up from school on a curb. My sister was jerking me around by the back of my book bag, and as she pulled me toward her, a car suddenly came up on the curb at high speed. It would have nailed me had she not jerked me around. Being young, I remember not totally processing this, and instead I just opted to pull her hair. Sisters are the best. I was returning from my grandfather's funeral a couple years ago, and I was on the highway when a sudden downpour forced me to pull over because I couldn't see and I was hydroplaning. I pulled over to the shoulder of the freeway and put my car in park and lit up a cigarette to wait out the worst of it. For no reason that I can fathom, I suddenly had an odd feeling that I should pull my car ahead further, so I put it back in drive and pulled ahead about 20 yards and put it back in park. Mind you, this was the middle of the afternoon and I was on a long, very straight stretch of the freeway, so really any place to pull over was just as good as any other. Not 2 minutes after I pulled ahead, I looked in my rearview mirror and I saw alternating headlights and tail lights headed right in my direction at a very high rate of speed. 2 women had lost control and their car was doing 360s as it went off the road just feet behind where I was sitting. There was an open field next to us, so they just skidded to a stop and everyone was fine. But if I hadn't pulled forward, they would have surely collided with me and things would have turned out much differently. I chalk that one up to Grandpa saving my ass. I was late to Christmas Eve Mass. Gasp. Church on Reddit, and I ended up having to stand in the back where the ushers stand. Turns out a very dashing young man caught my eye and apparently I caught his. 10 years later, we're getting married. This all happened because I was late to church and I had to stand in the back. Good times. Some idiot in class was throwing this really sharp pen across the room, returning it to me since I lent it to him. He threw it like a javelin. I didn't notice that he was crudely returning it to me, but I was drinking water during the incident. The angle that I was holding my water bottle up, as well as the gesture my fingers made in gripping it, helped the pen land right in between my ring and middle finger. And no further. It was centimeters away from my right eye. I'd hate to think what could have happened. I was in my car looking for a parking spot. Found one. Turned off the ignition. Then noticed outside my window a cop running right at me. He was waving and I couldn't hear him. So I finally got out of the car to talk to the cop. He had his gun prepared for what I thought was me, but then proceeded to tell me had I gotten out of my car just 1 minute before I would have been shot in the head. I had literally pulled into the middle of a shootout. Truth story. I'm a nursing student and my patient today passed away as I was walking in to give my first IV morphine. If he had died 2 minutes later, I would have had to write a statement and talk to who knows how many people. And I would have doubted my nursing skills for probably forever. Was having a smoke while waiting for the bus to take me to high school. My friends pulled up and asked if I needed a ride. I wanted to finish my smoke and was chatting with the hot girl across the street, so I passed. Less than 50 feet from my stop, he skidded on black ice and smashed into a tree. I probably wouldn't have time to put a seatbelt on. Smoking might have saved my life. One of my dad's friends worked at the World Trade Center. He survived both the 93 bombing and 9/11 because he was outside having a cigarette. Have you ever seen the movie Final Destination? If not, watch it. No. Sounds like a magic school bus type movie. When I was 17, I got invited to a party by a co-worker that was affiliated with a local gang. At the time, my town was going through a hell of a year of inter-gang violence. So much so that they set up injunctions in the hot areas of town to try and crack down on all this. Anyways, that night I ended up getting pulled over on the way to the party. The police officer kept me for roughly 15 minutes, doing his routine stuff. Meanwhile, the party that I was headed to ended up getting mobbed by a rival gang at almost that precise time. 6 people were stabbed. 1 guy died. And several people were seriously injured due to the fight. Had I not gotten pulled over, I'd have been right in the thick of it. Needless to say, best riding without a seatbelt ticket I've ever gotten. I was a few seconds away from buying a plane ticket for flight 3407 from Newark to Buffalo. Luckily a friend came into my room and convinced me to stay home that weekend. Checked online later that night and saw the plane had crashed and there were no survivors. Guess I got lucky this time. My apologies. This is long and I'm typing on my phone. Towards the end of college I went on a date with a girl who wanted to go to a club in town. I never wanted to go to this club, but since she really wanted to go, I begrudgingly agreed. When we arrived, I went to get her a drink. While at the bar, this little number walks right up to me and starts asking where I'm from and telling me how I look familiar. I entertain her a little and answer her questions. But I'm on a date and I'm a cynic and believe that this was just some girl who wanted free drinks. I tell her goodbye and go find my date. Fast forward about 10 months. And my girlfriend, not the same girl from my date, breaks up with me and a friend of mine starts pestering me to come to meet him at a bar so he can introduce me to his new lady. I show up, meet this girl, have a couple vodka tonics and go to leave. It turns out it's an open mic and my buddy starts telling me I need to go up and jam. I keep saying no. But after about 2 minutes of pestering I say okay. But just one song. I play the song. Get off stage. Go to say goodbye and just then my buddy's girlfriend tells me that one of her friends just showed up and there is some guy who keeps hanging around her and won't leave her alone so I need to pretend to be her boyfriend. Turns out this girl was the girl who came up to me in the bar months previously. We end up talking, then dating and ultimately got married. I am typing this from the hospital where 24 hours ago, my wife gave birth to our 3rd child. Yes, a little karma whoring. TLDR, I met a girl twice in 2 different points in my life. I was coerced into playing her boyfriend for a night to keep another guy away. She eventually became my real wife. We also just had our 3rd child 24 hours ago. Well, she did. Not me. Edit. Tried to correct the TLDR for easier reading. My sister once pushed me into a door by mistake. I was bleeding profusely and wasn't allowed to go to the school dance. It was in grade 7, luckily. Because someone spiked the food and everyone there was vomiting and high off whatever was in it. Indirectly, as it is about my mom and her dad. When my mother was a baby her crib was in her parents' room. For reasons unknown my grandfather got up in the middle of the night and moved the crib. Maybe an hour later. We're not sure because they fell asleep. The ceiling over where the crib was before caved in. I'm talking plaster and wood beams. She wouldn't have survived. And yours truly would have never been born. Several weekends ago on a mildly busy Northern Virginia highway I chose to stay in the middle lane for a little longer than usual before my exit. A few seconds after choosing to not change lanes the right lane came to a sudden halt due to a stalled car ahead. A big pickup truck hauling a heavy trailer slammed into the car that would have been in front of me, and it literally exploded. Debris and glass shooting in all directions as the truck slammed into it. I was so stunned that I didn't react to what was happening literally right next to me. The collision caused a chain reaction where an SUV in that lane ramped up onto a smaller car and literally rolled over into the lane I was in at the time right behind me. Had I braked or otherwise slowed because of what I was seeing next to me, that SUV would have rolled over in front of or onto me while I was traveling at 60 miles per hour. I passed by totally unscathed. Seconds from two different terrible collisions. Edit, too many commas. I used to rollerblade to work from my old house to work. One day I started down the street. Realized I forgot to put on deodorant and skated back into the house speedy as I could. And then went on my way. 4 minutes later I got hit by an SUV because the driver never looked right at the crosswalk. Shoulder gone with the stinky pits. Had all but given up on finding someone to talk to during some of the darkest days of my life. Was on R4R, and as I was scrolling to the bottom of the page just before I went to bed, I noticed a video link. The girl in that video turned out to be amazing, and half a year later we're going out. Had that video been on the next page I would have never seen it. Close call. After a day of skiing in New Zealand, my parents and I were heading back down the mountain and decided to stop for a guy that was trying to get a ride down the mountain. He turned out to be a local, and when visibility reached almost zero, he calmly, then not so calmly, told my dad to turn, just in time to keep us on the road. If we hadn't stopped for 3 seconds to pick him up, we would have gone off a 100m plus drop. I was taking my dog to her Saturday morning training class, and as I pulled up to a stop sign I turned around to check on her because she was getting herself tangled in her leash. I looked back for just a couple of seconds as I was pulling up to the 4-way stop with no one in sight. When I turned back around I see a Dodge Ram diesel truck on the stop sign going pretty fast. If I didn't look back to check on my dog I probably would have been demolished by that stupid truck. It was a scary feeling. A woman was stopped at a red light, looking down into her purse. The light turned green, but she didn't notice. The guy behind her laid on the horn in frustration. She looked up into the rearview mirror and gave him the middle finger. He followed her home. This was okay back in the 70s. They chatted with each other in her parents' driveway for over an hour, and the guy asks her out. They date for a while and eventually get married. They have 4 children, the second born being myself. I owe my life to the boldness of 2 people in a chance encounter. A slight shift in this series of events could have prevented my existence. An interesting twist. However, way back then, while my parents were dating, my father introduces his best friend from high school to my mom's sister. They marry a week later and eventually have 5 children together. Much later, the oldest of these children, my cousin, begins dating a girl from Europe. Here on an exchange program. She eventually introduces me to her friend who is here in the same exchange program. We date for a while and marry about 8 months later. We're coming up on our 11th anniversary and have a son and another baby on the way. I have truly won the cosmic lottery. I can't wait to tell this story to my kids when they grow up.